This is very uncommon in the humanities, and law is a humanity. And so what Jeannie Suk Gerson's essay just published in the New Yorker shows in Ramsayer's own words, and he is a lawyer. Yeah. In his own words, he said, oh, I didn't have the contracts. There aren't any contracts. So this is your world.
지유티비. 네, 여러분 안녕하세요. 여러분께 유익한 소식을 전해드리는 지유티비의 지유입니다. 네, 여러분 오늘은 정말 뜻깊은 분을 모시고 인터뷰를 진행하게 됐습니다. 바로 미국 코네티컷 대학교의 알렉시스 교수님을 모시고 인터뷰를 하게 됐는데요. 네, 하버드 대학교의 일본법 연구학자인 램세이어 교수가 얼마 전에 위안부 할머니들에 대한 정말 말도 안 되는 논문을 써서 우리 많은 사람들이 공분을 사고 있습니다. 다행히도 이 미국을 비롯한 전 세계 학계에서 이 램지어 교수의 논문과 주장에 반박하는 많은 글들과 반박 주장을 쏟아내고 있는데요. 일단 이 램지어 교수의 가장 큰 문제점은 바로 학문적 글을 써놓고서도 학문적 근거가 없다는 것이었습니다. 이 얘기는 우리 지엔이 석이라고 알려진 석지영 교수, 그러니까 하버드 교수에서 유일한 여성 교수이자 한국계 교수인 이 석지영 교수가 반박한 뉴요커 글에서도 살펴보실 수 있는데요. 네, 이 램지어 교수의 주장에 반박하는 정말 학문적인 주장을 펼치는 이 전 세계의 정말 훌륭한 학자분들 중에서 이 코네티컷 더든 교수님과의 인터뷰가 성사가 되어서 제가 이렇게 인터뷰로 준비해 보았습니다. 네, 그래서 우리나라 유튜버 최초로 이 알렉시스 더든 교수님과 진행한 인터뷰를 지금부터 보시겠습니다.
Thank you so much. It's nice to meet you. No, thank you for your interest in the story.
Oh my God, this is very honor and I really want to say on behalf of Korean, we really thank you for doing your academic excellent work and for doing all this meaningful historical work.
But no, I mean, again, thank you for your interest, because the part that matters is that survivors from everywhere, Korea, the Philippines, Taiwan, Japan, the thing that matters to them is to have their story heard before they die. Yes. And so this unfortunate moment in terms of denialism really helps the survivors tell their story.
Yes, right. Yeah. And I think that's the key point for doing all this, right? So yeah. Thank you very much. I just read the article that you sent to me before, and I got some of questions. So right. I guess this time for Ramsayer's article, the biggest issue is he used the term contract in a very, wrong way. So how do you think that, and do you think what's the biggest issue overall on this?
Well, I think what we've learned from Jeannie Suk Gerson's essay in the New Yorker is that without a shadow of a doubt, Professor Ramsayer did not have any evidence on which to make his argument. And this is really important in the sense I am an absolute strong believer in academic freedom. It's what I base my existence on. And so I uphold any scholarly attempt to make an argument, to change the story, to provide evidence that counters the prevailing narrative. Honestly, that is the point of scholarly research. To ensure academic freedom, one has to uphold academic integrity. And this may sound really snobby or really well, who cares? But it's, you cannot make an argument that is supposed to be protected by law, or at least constitutional rights, that is based on complete fantasy. And I think that, to me, those of us who have researched this topic or this history for decades immediately looked at the sources and said, what is this? There are no sources. And so, we're trapped now in a debate about whether academic freedom should be upheld. Of course, academic freedom should be upheld, but not if it's a fantasy. And so again, if it's hard sciences,
right.
And we know countless cases of retraction anywhere in the world where a lab researcher has felt so pressured to produce data to make an argument to, it's a different kind of publication. But once that data is demonstrated to be fraudulent, the article is retracted. This is very uncommon in the humanities, and law is a humanity. And so what Jeannie Suk-Gerson's essay just published in the New Yorker shows in Ramsayer's own words, and he is a lawyer. In his own words, he said, oh, I didn't have the contracts. There aren't any contracts. So this isn't a question of academic freedom. It's a question of somebody made up the sources in a falsifying manner. And I can't understand why, so I would never guess why, but he did it. And not only in this essay, what we're also learning in the past 3 weeks is that several of his already recently published essays are based on data that does not exist. And at this stage, the problem really is the problem of Harvard University in terms of how to approach. I don't know whether the word discipline is correct or not, and it's not my business in some ways. But I think that's the alarming part of the New Yorker essay is we have in Ramsayer's words that he made up the evidence.
Oh, yeah, so right. So you're saying that if he has enough evidence to, like, on the ground of academical freedom, and he has factual evidence, then he can have freedom to, like, have his, like, claims, whatever, but right, he doesn't have any factual evidence, and that's the number one problem. And even though, like, historians have consensus on this comfort women issue, like you are saying that procedural, like, misdoings, right?
Exactly. And so there's a really important component here. There's opinion. An opinion, especially here we are on YouTube, which I think is great, but we know that you can pretty much say anything you want on YouTube. I know this, but my child wants to be a YouTuber, right? and he loves this. I'm like, what is that? But that's fine. And that I totally respect that. That's part of an open society, a civil society. I do believe that, you know, there's certain boundaries. Hate speech, I think, is important, but I think that's a very difficult body of law because I uphold freedom of speech. So if something is said that incites violence, you know, we see cases of this around the world. If a particular YouTube channel or a particular opinion essay suggests the killing of a certain group of people or targeting violence against a certain group of people, then I think that that's a real problem. And we've seen in the United States, for example, Twitter accounts being suspended for incitement of violence, Facebook accounts inciting violence. And so that's an appropriate measure, but that's still opinion. And that, you know, as a historian, I would use those examples to measure divisions in society, and I would record that as a footnote or analyze it. Academic articles, which, let's be honest, and really, you know, something to think about here, nobody reads them except for a very small group of people, not because they're smart. We're not smarter than everybody else. This is just what we do for a living, right? And so these are articles published in journals that very, very few people read. And the journals, for example, are wildly expensive because so few people read them that often only university libraries can afford subscriptions to them. I mean, $400 or $500 a year for 3 or 4 copies of a journal. Who would do that, especially when they're all on the internet, right? So the practical matter here is we're talking about an article, the Ramsayer article, and now articles, in publications very few people read, but we read them to learn about new evidence.
Right.
And we read them in order to ask new questions to further, you know, to further the course of learning and teaching and education. That's what we do. And to find these topics explored with a total disregard for evidence, when clearly the author is aware that each of the essays beginning with the essay that's called The Uproar on the Halmoni, beginning with that essay. But there are others that he's published about a 1923 earthquake in Japan in which he denies that Koreans were massacred. This is well documented, including not just archival but forensic evidence.
네, 여러분 방금 인터뷰에서도 보셨다시피 이 램지어 교수의 주장은 학문적 그림에도 불구하고 학문적인 근거가 전혀 없기 때문에 그냥 주장, 의견에 불과합니다. 그런데 이 주장과 의견이 하버드 로스쿨 교수 그리고 본인 스스로가 변호사인 사람이 했던 주장이라고 믿기지 않을 정도로 정말 근거가 결여된 주장을 하고 있는 것이 이번 사태의 가장 큰 문제이자 핵심이라고 볼 수 있는데요. 네, 이 두 번째 인터뷰 편에서는 실제 더든 교수님과 이 학계의 학자들이 왜 이렇게 열심히 싸워주시고 있는지 그리고 그분들이 이렇게 싸워주시는 게 우리에게 어떤 의미가 있는지 현대사회를 살아가는 우리에게 어떤 의미가 있는지에 대해서 알아보도록 하겠습니다. 그럼 우리 지유TV는 또 좋은 영상으로 찾아올게요. 여러분 안녕.